Welcome to Countdown to Decision 2024, brought to you by the Dobson Family Institute, where we are getting you ready to be all God intended you to be in this election season. I'm Joseph Backholm. It's great to be with you. Now, in every episode, we bring you stories about people and the facts and everything you need to know to make this election one that you can be a good steward of. My co-host, Allison Santafonte, isn't able to join us for today's conversation, but I'm grateful that our guest is going to bring us everything that we need. Michele Bachmann represented Minnesota's 6th Congressional District from 2007 to 2015, and she ran for president in 2012 as well. She's a wife, a mother of 5, has been a foster mom to 23 since leaving Washington, D.C. She was appointed as the dean of the Robertson School of Government at Regent University, and she also serves on the board of directors here at the Dobson Family Institute. She joins me now. Michele, so thankful for your time today.
Joseph, thank you so much. We're going to have fun today.
We are. And one of the reasons I'm grateful to have you is because we talk to a lot of people about elections, but most of the people I talk to haven't themselves run for president. So tell us a little bit about how that experience informed how you view big decisions like this as a citizen.
Well, having run for president myself, it is an extremely difficult process. It's one of the most difficult things anyone will take up in terms of an endeavor. There isn't one area of your life that isn't probed. You are criticized from morning until night. Your families are criticized from morning till night. Usually death threats accompany it. So why would anyone do it? The reason why I did it is because I knew that we needed to have a change in Washington, D.C. I was encouraging other believers to run for office, and I couldn't get rid of this sense that was on my heart that someone needed to challenge the then sitting president, who was Barack Obama. And so my husband and I fasted and prayed for 3 days, and we both felt very confident that I was supposed to do this, because imagine waking up in the morning, looking in the bathroom mirror and saying to yourself, I'm running for president of the United States. That is not an easy thing to do. So I did it because of what was at stake in the country. And I was very concerned about socialized medicine that Barack Obama was putting in place, together with all the other things, the havoc that he was bringing across the world stage, much like we're seeing now under Joe Biden, the havoc in the Middle East and the wars that were beginning. And I saw that under Barack Obama. And so I knew we needed to have a different worldview. And so we're only going to get more of the same if they win in November.
And during the Trump administration, there weren't Venezuelan gangs taking over apartments in Aurora, Colorado. Talk a bit about the immigration issue, if you would, Michele.
Yeah.
It seems to be a non-issue on the left. They kind of try to minimize it. I actually was at the Democratic National Convention. For 2 days, I talked to voters, asked them what they thought about the immigration issue, how important it was or was not to them. And it was literally, and they would say it's a 0 out of 10. They don't think about it. It was not on their radar. How can it be that on the right, it is a top 1 or 2 and often a top priority issue for the voters, but on the left, it seems to register nowhere? Why is that?
Well, I think there are a lot of people on the left who are worried about it too. Not the people who were in the convention where you were, because they're kind of they've drunk the Kool-Aid, so to speak, on that issue. But if you talk to most people, independents, Democrats, Republicans, it is a real issue. Why is it a real issue? Because we've had, by some estimates, close to 20 million illegal aliens come in the last nearly 4 years. Donald Trump's big issue that launched him onto the national stage was immigration, because he said he was going to build a wall and he was going to stop the illegal entry. And he was pushed back at every turn by the Democrats. They did not want a wall. They want illegal immigrants to come into the United States. Why? Because they want people dependent on government and government checks and government services, because the Democrats know that people who are dependent on government checks will most likely vote for them. But people who want safety, less criminality, they want to have higher wages, they don't want illegal immigration in the United States. That was Donald Trump's position. So we had a very low rate of illegal immigration because Donald Trump was enforcing the law. He was keeping people that were coming to the United States to seek asylum. He was keeping them in Mexico until they could prove they had a legitimate asylum claim. He had a very ordered way of immigration. But now, literally every single day, someone is stabbed, someone is murdered, someone is raped from illegal aliens who are in the United States. I just read of another Venezuelan gang that kicked somebody in the teeth and stabbed them. Little girls who were being raped, 9-year-old girl that was raped. Why in the world would we sit still for 1 minute and allow any woman to be raped or anyone to be stabbed or their car to be jacked from them, from illegal alien gangs? When I read about Aurora, Colorado, when you had Venezuelan gangs that were so brazen, they were taking like AK-47s, coming into an apartment complex. They took over the apartment complex. This is privately owned. They took it over, kicked people out. They moved in. This is something that would happen in Venezuela, not in beautiful Aurora, Colorado. They did it not only to one building, but to a second building. And here's the kicker. The governor of Colorado, Jared Polis, I served with him in Congress. He didn't seem too fazed by it because they see that illegal aliens are going to be their future ticket for voters, for them. So just think of that. This is the greatest voter registration scam in history, where Democrats are literally paying illegal aliens to come into America because they want the illegal aliens to be their new voters. They don't care about us. They want the illegal aliens to come in. You can't even make this up. You can't believe that there would actually be a major political party that would take this posture today. And yet every single day, this is what they're proving. And it's got to end. We can't have this level of criminality against innocent American people, certainly not against innocent elderly and innocent children, innocent woman in broad daylight coming out to her car and killed as someone wants to steal her car from her. This has got to stop.
You know, Michelle, the New York Post recently ran a report stating that up to 75% of the arrests in Midtown Manhattan were of illegal immigrants, people who had entered the country illegally. Now, what's interesting about that is because we are in campaign season, we've actually seen Kamala Harris feature the border wall, Trump's border wall, in her advertisements, where she talks about how tough she is on illegal immigration.
Which shows what a fraud she is, what a fake she is.
Has Trump won the issue if he now has Kamala Harris running ads of his wall, implying that she supports that as well?
He's absolutely won the issue, because when you look at the area of the economy and inflation and illegal immigration, these issues are almost neck and neck. They almost tie for first place for what people care about. They're sick of illegal immigration, because why should somebody be allowed to break the laws of our country and come into our country and then demand free health care, demand a free place to live, demand free food? When people are having tough times right now buying groceries, I know when I go to the grocery store, I take food out of my grocery cart. I put it back on the shelf because I think, I can't spend that much for a box of this or a can of that. I never spent that much before. I'm not the only one doing this. Women all over America, men all over America are having the same feeling. And plus, when you go into a downtown, especially a major metropolitan city, a lot of people just shy away from going in these major cities anymore because they're dangerous. Even in broad daylight, they're dangerous. They're afraid to park their car. They don't know if their car will be there when they come back. This isn't the way life was. Even just 4 years ago, life wasn't like this. And so we've seen the quality of life in America absolutely drop. And people need to realize the United States government is broke. We owe money. We don't have reserves of money sitting there. So when all of these illegal aliens are coming into the United States, this is incredibly expensive. It's well over $200 billion a year that we're not spending on American citizens, that we're spending on illegal aliens. And how do we get repaid? With crime. How do we get repaid? With fraud. and we're paying for it. And then we have all the prosecutors who refuse to police crime and put illegal aliens in jail. They'll put a woman who's praying in front of an abortion clinic in jail, but they refuse to put a Venezuelan gang member in jail. And so that's why we have to stop having two-tiered justice in the United States. They need to be deported. And how crazy is it that in the state of California, California wants to give 0 down payments on a house. They want to give loans to illegal aliens, and they want to give illegal aliens loans that have no interest, and they want to give them $150,000 on a down payment for a house. Why do they want to do that? Because they want to make it impossible to deport these illegal aliens. This is insanity. When you can't afford to buy a house, or your kids can't afford to buy a house, why are we paying criminal gangs from Venezuela? Why are we paying $150,000 for a down payment for a house for them in the state of California? It's insane. It's why people are angry, and they should be angry. But instead of just getting angry, we need to pray and fast and seek the Lord, and we need to vote. More than anything, especially Christians, we need to register. We need to vote. There is no excuse for that, because we need to be responsible citizens of this country. If we spend 5 minutes griping, that's worse than spending 5 minutes going online and figuring out how to register, how to vote, how to get your church to vote, how to get your Bible study to vote, your neighbors to vote. That's what we've got to do. So we're talking about how difficult life is now, how difficult life is going to be if we don't change horses, which we need to do. We need to have a new administration. And again, we've never had a better compare and contrast. We had 4 years of prosperity and peace under Donald Trump, whether you like him or not, whether you like his personality or his jokes or not. We had a great life in the United States versus under Harris and Biden, and now Walz, who would be her vice presidential candidate. We know what life is going to be. She's already revealed her tax plan, and her tax plan would literally destroy mid-sized businesses in the United States, destroy them, because she wants to tax people on money they've never even earned. I'm a former tax lawyer. I saw her tax plan, and it is so bad that even CNN had to come against Kamala Harris because she would destroy the American economy. So the choice to me is pretty easy.
Yeah, there's a lot there, Michele, and I just want to highlight, make sure people did not miss one of the parts that you just mentioned, where even Nancy Pelosi recently came out in support of the idea that the state of California would help buy homes for illegal immigrants so they would have a place to live. And I think it is increasingly unsettling, and this is a left, right, center, wherever you find yourself on the political spectrum, the idea that my government cares more about people who have never paid a day of taxes, who are here illegally, than they do about me and my family. And the more they give to other people who aren't citizens and aren't contributing, the more it costs those who have been here their whole lives. And I do think that sense of abandonment is real for many. I think that ultimately is the base of Trump's supporters. And I just wonder if people are actually going to see that and support. But Michele, I want to pivot to some...
And Joseph, to that, government shouldn't be buying houses for anybody.
For sure.
They shouldn't be buying houses for anybody, but certainly if they're going to be buying houses, it should be for American citizens who are born to American parents. It shouldn't be to illegal aliens who broke the law to come into this country, have no hope of ever being able to continue the maintenance on a home or to finance a home. Yeah. I mean, it's insane.
I think that's a point.
I'm sorry.
I think that's a point virtually every American will agree with. Michele, if I may, in our last few minutes, because you are from Minnesota, I think you have some specific and some helpful insights that are unique to Tim Walz, the current governor, of course, of Minnesota, who's trying to become the vice president. I know that you represented Minnesota for 8 years. You were in the state Senate prior to that. I don't know if you have any personal relationship with Tim Walz, but I'd love to hear your reflections on him as governor and even as a member of Congress, perhaps before that, and what you think he indicates and what does he represent for the future of America should the Harris-Walz ticket be elected?
Well, I know Tim Walz quite well. He and I were elected to the United States Congress the same day. We were sworn in on the same day. We served together for 8 years. We went back and forth on the plane. I knew his family, so I know him. He looks like a very normal guy next door who'd be wearing plaid shirts, aw shucks, great kind of neighbor, but that's packaging. The real Tim Walz is very different. Tim Walz has gone to communist China 35 times. He was in business with the communist Chinese. He was bringing Minnesota impressionable young people to China to groom children so that they would be in favor of the modern view of communism. Tim Walz himself was taken up with communist China, and he was so enthusiastic about communist China. He said, they gave me so many gifts, I couldn't even bring them all back to the United States. So he was groomed and he was paid off for the communist Chinese. And when he worked as a social studies high school teacher, he was also trying to groom his students to be in favor and see communist China in a favorable light. I assure you, the 100 million people who've been murdered by communism in the last century don't view communist China in a positive, favorable light. He's very dangerous when it comes to worldview because he holds to a communistic worldview. He also, in the state of Minnesota, we have a very large Muslim population from Somalia, and we had outrageous fraud committed by Somalis in the state of Minnesota, not all, but by some. We had over $100 million stolen in a fraudulent daycare scene. He didn't do anything about it. He looked the other way. He protected them. Why? Because they were his constituents. And so the law applies to some, but not to the Muslims in Minnesota. So they got away with fraud. We had the worst COVID fraud in the United States during COVID, the PPP loans. So again, Somali fraud, it was well over $250 million. In fact, it'll come out in the end that it was $500 million. Again, Tim Walz looked the other way. Nobody got fired. Nobody went to jail. He protected. These were his voters. He protected them. And now they're currently involved in another fraud dealing with education funds for autism. So he was considered someone to be picked by Kamala Harris because he was very favorable to the Muslim community. And so this is something that people need to understand. And I'm not saying we should be anti-Muslim, but he was very uneven in his hand of justice. Here's what he did as governor. He is the most pro-abortion governor in the United States. His first agenda item that he passed as governor in the 2023 legislative session was to make Minnesota an abortion sanctuary state. You can murder a baby up until the moment of birth. But even worse, what Tim Walz did is he repealed over 50 years worth of pro-life protections that we put into law. He even repealed the Born Alive Act. Under Tim Walz, 8 babies were born alive in abortion. Those 8 babies were allowed to lie on the table and die because he repealed the Born Alive Act. This is gruesome. He also passed the transgender bill in Minnesota. Minnesota is a transgender state because of Tim Walz, which means anyone from any state can come to Minnesota and they can become chemically castrated. They can be physically mutilated so they no longer appear like the sex that God gave them. Also in Minnesota, it's now mandated that if any parent disagrees with what the school system says about a child, if they want to change if they want to identify as a boy or a girl, the child will be removed from the parent's care in the state of Minnesota. The child then will go through chemical castration, physical mutilation. After all that's done, the parent pays for it, and then the child is returned to the parents. There's full sexuality education of pro-transgender taught in every Minnesota classroom. This fall, every child, including every kindergartner, has to choose their pronouns in the state of Minnesota. This is just the tip of the iceberg, just a taste of what he's imposing. He's changed all the curriculum in the state of Minnesota. It's now mandated that they teach what's called ethnic studies, but it's really racial division and hatred based upon skin color. You might call it, by short form, hate white people. That is the purpose of this education that he's putting in. But even worse than that, what he's done to the economy. Minnesota was sitting on $17 billion surplus. We're a state of 5.7 million people, but we had a surplus of 17 billion, in large part because of COVID money. He spent every dime in 1 year. He increased the state budget by 40%. Permanently going forward. There's no more money sitting around in reserves. He spent it all. And he increased that level of spending. And so now the state of Minnesota is in deep indebtedness. So what did he spend money on? He's giving away free college education to illegal aliens or to anybody making less than $80,000. He's giving free school breakfast, free school lunch, free school snacks. He's starting new departments. And also, this is the other thing that he did with the Family Medical Leave Act. In the state of Minnesota, any employee, for any reason, can say that they want to stay home for up to 20 weeks a year. You're hearing me right. 20 weeks a year. They can claim that they're sick or that somebody in their family might be sick and that they have to take care of that family member. And by the way, they get to define family. So they could say, this is my aunt or this is my gay boyfriend and I'm going to take care of my gay, whatever it is. They can have up to 20 weeks a year. The employer can't ask a question. And if the employer interferes, the employer is the one who is fined and who has the Attorney General's office come against them. So what's happened in Minnesota? Business are shutting their doors. They're slamming their doors shut. They're fleeing. The first year Tim Walz came into Minnesota, this never happened before. 19,000 people left the state. Last year, over 30,000 people left the state. Once Harris chose Walz to be her running mate, support for Harris dropped by 5% in the state of Minnesota because people know what Tim Walz did. He's been a disaster for religious freedom in the state of Minnesota. He gave all this money to the college and university system, but he said, I'm not going to give it to the colleges that have a faith statement. So if you're a Christian college, you're not going to get money. Or if you're a pro-life center in Minnesota, you used to get some small grants, you're not getting any grants. The only organization that we're giving money to are the Planned Parenthoods and those who want to have transgender services and abortion services. It is stunningly shocking. And Minnesota doesn't have a conservative media, so most people in the state of Minnesota don't even know the disaster yet that Tim Walz has put into place. That's just a few of the things. Here's probably one of the worst things that he did in the state of Minnesota. So what he did in Minnesota, he will do for the rest of the country. That's what people need to be warned. He is outlawing energy sources for Minnesota. Minnesota is the coldest state in the nation, but he's outlawed coal, natural gas, oil, nuclear, hydro, any form of electricity at all. He has outlawed other than solar and wind. Well, guess what? Solar costs 200% more than traditional sources of energy. Wind costs 4 times as much as traditional sources of energy. So the wind and solar isn't even built. And yet by 2030, 80% of all of our energy use can only come from wind and solar. My brother, who's an engineer, laughed and said that will never happen. I told him, too late, it's already law. And he shook his head and he said, people just won't have power then. There won't be power. So this is what Tim Walz has done. He's brought absolute disaster to a once great state. Minnesotans can't wait to have him leave our state, but we certainly don't want to see him a heartbeat away from the presidency with Kamala Harris. Again, the most liberal senator in the U.S. Senate, the most unpopular vice president in the history of polling for vice presidents. We couldn't have a worse ticket. They're completely anti-Israel, and they're in favor of covering up and supporting some of the worst elements that there are. So I just want people to know about Tim Walz and what he's done.
Thank you so much for your enthusiasm, your continued service to our country, and your time today.
Thanks, Joseph. It's great to be with you. Bye-bye.
And it's good to be with you. And for all of you who have joined this conversation, thank you so much for being with us here on Countdown to Decision 2024 with James Dobson Family Institute. On the comments below, let us know the issues that are most concerning and important to you this election. We'll see you there.